And yes, we are on the air. So welcome. No, we're not on the air just yet. Hold on a second.
It was the counting.
Yep.
Yeah, completely
That's what
you.
threw me off.
Just count from
Okay.
three. It's a much more space to move there.
No, we are actually on there. I just forgot to move the screen. Okay, so we are on there, and hey, welcome once again to Youth Rugby Discussion. We're a podcast that focuses on youth rugby union, primarily in New England because that's where we are. We're a collection of current and past coaches, administrators, just parents and people involved in growing the youth of rugby. And though some of us may sit on different boards, we do not speak for any entity out there except just the antics and the banter and the topics that we discuss and throw around through this. So please join us today. We're going to be talking about, and let me do this funky little transition here, assistant coaches. So we're going to go off the top so we can associate a voice to a name. So Alan, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, this is Coach Alan. I coach for the Rentham Barbarians.
Hello, this is Chris. I am rugby dad, but it took me a while to think about this, but I have been an assistant coach and I have had assistant coaches before. So I belong in this topic.
Fantastic. And I'm Daniel. You've heard my voice earlier.
Jeff Karras, Rugby Rhode Island, dad and a assistant coach.
And Kate McCabe, I coach at Belmont High School, and I started as an assistant coach, and now I have assistant coaches.
Fantastic. And so that is what we're going to be discussing. We're going to be discussing assistant coaching. I think there's a lot out there about every aspect of rugby, obviously, and there's a lot about coaches. You know who the coach is. You know who the head coach is. There's usually a lot of responsibilities that are very clear have been studied and looked at, whatever. In many cases there's a great deal of responsibility, and there's in some cases a financial stake in being a coach. So it's very clear who the coach is. But let's talk about something that's a little bit grayer. Every team might do it slightly different. What is an assistant coach? How do you become an assistant coach? What are the pitfalls? What are the strengths? When do you know that you need an assistant coach, and how do you get some of those? So let's hear. I myself have been an assistant coach in the past. It was a great time. It was a very challenging time also. But let's go ahead and talk about assistant coaches. Does anybody want to kick us off with anything? Because I have plenty of stuff that I'd like to be able to explore. Anybody?
Well, I'll talk about our embarrassment of riches at Bishop Hendricken. We actually have 7 assistant coaches on our high school team, and that's partly because we're the only game in the state. And it's an all-boys school, and a lot of dads have played before, so they tend to come around. We have 2 coaches who were former players at the school and now teach at the school. We have 2 assistant coaches who have never been connected with the school and just come by to lend their support, and because they're rugby people. We have one who's a doctor, so he kind of does dual hat for that, but he's also a rugby player. And there's me. I got sucked into it because my kid was playing. And we have one of the actually the dean of students is a good guy to have as an assistant coach because he's in charge of discipline, and he can keep the rugby players out of trouble when they get in trouble, I guess. But part of it is we all do a different kind of role on the team. That seems like it might be a lot of coaches. There are 2 who are clearly the head coaches with the varsity, and Skip Berry, who many of you know, the grand old master of rugby in Rhode Island, is co-head coach, and so normally Skip takes the forwards, and Coach Humphrey takes the backs. Hump is absolutely the head coach, and Skip's by his side, and then everybody else is kind of devolved into different roles. And so, the younger coaches, because they're a lot more spry, they can get in, they can actually demonstrate and do a lot more physical things than a guy like me. I've got a titanium hip, so I'm not gonna show tackling technique. And I'm more, frankly, as an administrator. because they needed that role. So, I think, you look to see if is there a progression. There are needs, and I think people try to fill needs. And I think the thing that was interesting to me is, I said, Coach Hump an email saying, "Hey, I'm a dad. My son wants to play rugby. I've been a rugby player. Can I come help coach?" He said, "Yeah, you can come help coach. That's great." And so I showed up, and he introduced me as a coach, and so I was an assistant coach, and I felt really uncomfortable about that because, um, having been involved in other sports before, I'm like, isn't there a certification? Isn't there some kind of formality that needs to go on here? And so I actually myself went and did the 100 level. And when I did the 100 level, I started talking to the other coaches. I said, "Oh, I thought that 100 level for USA Rugby was pretty interesting. And it's good, it put some structure to everything." They were like, "What are you talking about?" So, I went with them and got them to do the 100. And then when I started Rugby Rhode Island and set up the state-based organization in Rhode Island, I needed coaches. So I brought the coaching 200 level course to the state, and I got the assistant coaches who had been coaching, some of them for almost 10 years, to come and get their 200 level certification. So that is certainly a loosey goosey way to do it. Certainly, Coach Humphrey has an entire life of playing rugby, and he's from Wales, and so it's deeply imbued in him. But those of us who are club players, we know a little bit enough of rugby to have played before, and we know a little bit about our position or maybe what the pack does if we were forwards, but far from having any kind of mentor level understanding of what needs to happen and what the mechanics of coaching require. That is something that I don't think we have good on ramps for people to. I should say it's been my experience where I am. There aren't a lot of good on ramps for people to come on and be assistant coaches in a defined way that we may have in other sports.
It's probably
Yeah,
worth just
good
quickly
word, Jeff.
clarifying that the L100 is an introduction, a good introduction to rugby, as you were saying, Jeff. But the 200 is USA Rugby's blessing for you to lead contact-oriented training. I just want to clarify for everyone, but yeah, very interesting. Sorry, Chris, I jumped over you. I just
And I'd like to and not challenge. I want to look at what Jeff, what you said. I completely agree with you 100%. But I want to look at it from a slightly different perspective. I think there's really great on ramps for being an assistant coach. I think there's not any great defined on ramps for formally. Making that a formal process, right? Because I think I see two really great, funnels for getting assistant coaches. One is the over enthusiastic parent that has, never been involved with rugby whatsoever, but they're bringing their kid, and oh my God, this is so much fun. I get out there and I get to have fun. I get to hang out with my kid. So like that's one great on ramp. It's that archetype. It's the very enthusiastic parent that just needs somebody to look on the sideline and say, "Hey, I need help with this drill over here. I literally just need you to stand here." And you know who they are because they wore their light hiking, all terrain sneakers, sneaker hiking boots, or they're actually wearing sneakers. And if anybody ever wore cleats, they're on the field immediately. Like I don't have to look to the sideline; they're almost shoving me out of the way. And the other one, as you mentioned, are the former players. They're just looking for an excuse to get in there, and you can tell because they're kind of like crouching as they're watching the drills. They're kind of almost going through the motions while they're in their chairs on the sidelines. So those two are two archetypes that I look to see. Hey, you guys look like I can really use you. Get over here. And I think those are two great pathways, but to formally make them an assistant coach, like what rites and rituals, what things do you conjure to say you are now the assistant coach? I think that's not as formal, and I applaud you for going out there doing it yourself and then engaging other folks for do that, because I don't think a lot of clubs, I don't know, I find it difficult to say, hey, you've been really helpful, go take a training course. Does that make
But I
sense?
think Jeff described quite a different model to
Mhm.
some of the stuff you're introducing there. I mean, it sounds
Yep.
like Hendricken has a great program, and they have a good way of bringing the coaches in, putting them into somewhat formalized roles. I mean, I was very
Yep.
interested, like 7 coaches for a school
Wow.
with only like 2 teams, or 1 team. That's a phenomenal number. That's like our entire coaching staff at the Barbarians. We have 7 teams. Whereas I think the scenario you described, Daniel, is very much what we went through at the Barbarians. If you twitched and looked rugby-esque, we had you on the field helping. And I mean, we have a photograph on our Facebook page of teaching kids scrummaging technique. Again, 7 scrummaging, so not significant. But one of the kids you can just see is wearing jeans and sneakers on a cold, wet, windy day, because he was a dad and just happened to be standing too close to me when I needed another body to make the numbers up and just help out. And I give the guy full credit for just stepping in and doing it. He was wonderful, but he didn't come back to coach. I think that was enough for him. But yeah, there's 2 very, very interesting different models, and I wonder how much the outcomes the coaches are looking for, or those individuals looking for, is part of what drives them. I
Absolutely.
guess that's a great segue.
Yep. Sorry, Jeff, I cut
think-
you off. Kate?
Well, and I'll let Kate talk.
I was just going to say, I think like in an ideal world, that assistant coaching becomes like a good entry point for anyone that's interested. I'm hearing that people are, like it's both either like somebody that's eager and there and somebody that's interested and potentially not looking for the full responsibility that corresponds with being a head coach. And I think like that is a big part of what got me into assistant coaching, was that I was still playing in my, alma mater. I went to BU and I played rugby at BU. And while I was still playing, they asked me to come back and spend a little bit of time there. And so I started as an assistant coach, just working with forwards and then eventually working with the B side. And I think like, for me, like just because you play a sport doesn't mean you know how to coach it. And I think assistant coaching can be a great entry point for people that are interested to get information on how to translate the sport that we love to a large group filled with a variety of different motivations for being there, And it takes a lot to learn how to coach.
I had another question now, just thinking about it now. Is rugby harder to coach than say other sports? I remember friends of mine over here in the States telling me that they've been coaching soccer. I was like, oh, when did you start playing soccer? So I never played, but I coach kids soccer. And so to me that seems a fascinating journey in, and I don't want to judge the quality of soccer, etc. But I hear similar things from lacrosse, where lacrosse coaches have been taught to coach without having ever played, and I just wonder whether is rugby harder to learn to coach, or do we not have such a good system to bring people through? I think kind of to your point, Jeff.
Well, I think there was such an explosion in soccer, and everybody started playing it. They were less coaches than they were, like den leaders or that kind of thing, just to do the organizational part of it and get the kids out there. And it wasn't at a competitive level. I think you get to that level, you have to know it. We just don't have the experience base in rugby for people to even think they would consider doing it. So, I mean, it's the challenge I have every time I go to start up a team, is where am I going to get my coaches? And, I got to get one guy who can commit to being a head coach, but trying to get 3 or 4 other assistant coaches. One thing that was, talked to Dave LaFlame and Coxie over at Providence College, trying to get college kids to come over and be assistant coaches down at the next level down, which, and one of the things I'm thinking for flag rugby at the rec center, if we ever get that far in Providence, is to get the Hendricken guys over to do that, because they have public service hours they have to get. But that would be a great way to start getting more players to think about eventually coaching.
Absolutely. That would be absolutely fantastic. That would be so cool.
Because that's the story for all of us, isn't it? We're all ex-players who ended up coaching. I mean, Kate, you articulated your story really well.
Yeah, I know. I was just going to add to Jeff's point that at Belmont, there's a middle school club I mean, it's really like an after school thing. They get together and play touch once a week. But it's primarily run. I mean, there is a adult coach there. But it's like put on by the PTA and it's run by the high school kids. So essentially it's, like people at different levels. And my first assistant coaches at Belmont were kids that I coached or were college players that I had coached at BU. And I was like, hey, listen, I need assistant coaches. Like, can you give me a couple of days a week? And they stayed for years. So I think it's an amazing opportunity to like talk to a level up and ask them to come down and share what they know.
Well, and I think the other thing that I particularly struggle with in Rhode Island, trying to grow the sport, is legitimacy with parents. Particularly with, it's one thing to say that you could, babysit a soccer team and field, little kids soccer at, first grade or something like that. But it's quite another thing to take high school kids and go out there and tackle each other. I'm always worried about the liability. I'm always worried about people following the rules and crossing their I and dotting their T when there are some minimum things we expect. And frankly, that was the thing that bothered me a little bit about being assistant coach at Hendricken, is that, it was sure, come on, whatever, do whatever, you can be an assistant coach. And the other assistant coaches who had been doing it for quite some time, including supervising tackle play, had not been certified in the right way for USA Rugby. And so I kind of whispered in the administrator's ear, saying, we really are putting the school at risk here by not having a 200 level coach when we're, for coaching the B side when we go off and do something. And when I put it in that perspective, they were, pretty eager to get that particular coach qualified. But if I hadn't said anything, we probably would have just been going along as we had been going along.
And I think one good distinction to make is that I think we're talking about two different types of rugby, two different formats. We're talking about the 15s and we're talking about the 7s. And yes, although there is also full contact in the 7s, in the 15s, I think it is a dramatically different universe when you're talking about 7s flag, which is something that I coach, versus high school 15s, which Kate, Jeff, you guys have more experience. Even obviously full contact 7s is very different than flag. So for flag, I think I can get away with having just about any parent that wants to join and help out, because there aren't a lot of these really heavy issues that you need to worry about, like full contact, tackle, and just the number of bodies that are going to be involved, one in every practice, and then in each of the drills or whatever it is that you're trying to convey. And as a coach, I think in 7s at my level, I can actually take somebody that has no idea what we're going to do next from a coaching perspective, give him an idea of what the drill is supposed to look like mechanically and what it's looking to achieve. So I think I can do that on the field. So I can bring a parent off a lawn chair and have them help, as a stand-in assistant coach, a lot easier than I can imagine Alan or Jeff or Kate when you're having tackling practice looking to the sideline, or having a parent on the sideline waving their hands and going, "Oh, I played in college. Well, I played in college. Here, can I jump in and help?"
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I have used parents, and I do use parents. But to your point, Daniel, when we're doing, anything which has some physical complexity to it, like tackling, no, you can't use parents for that. I either want a former player or another coach to help in those scenarios. Where I've used parents quite a bit is getting them to set up like defensive lines, where you can say, okay, guys, I need you just to be able to stand in a row and come up together. Keep lockstep, etc., and come up quickly, or move along, slide left, slide right. Strangely, parents picked it up really, really quickly. Rugby players don't, but
Yeah.
But they're in those scenarios, they're very, very helpful, because they're being big as well means, compared to most of the kids who are playing, means the kids have to think that little bit harder about finding a space, etc. But they're not as fast moving, so the kids get a reward for doing the right things, moving to space, etc. But
Right.
yeah, you're absolutely right, Daniel. When it comes to, you know, tackling legitimate more than just learning to lean on each other, scrummaging and stuff like that, no, it has to be someone who knows what they're doing.
Right. I mean, for my level for flag, yeah, I can take somebody off a lawn chair, because I see them in my mind as like different progressions of how I can use them. Anything from you're a large cone to you are a autonomous cone to a smart cone. That's kind of how I think of parents. I can go ahead and I can use them as a cone or a cone that can move around within some parameters. And then, smarter, more rugby savvy parents, they can be cones that actually move around in a semi-intelligent way. And then from there, I sort of see an assistant coach. Like the next stage up from just a cone is an assistant coach, and that's pretty nebulous because that could go from I've just graduated. I've never played rugby. I've just graduated from being a semi-autonomous cone to being an assistant coach, versus some of the coaches that we have right now, some of the assistant coaches, which I mean, they really could take aside themselves if they wanted to. Um, if there was space, if we had more sides, they could probably just take an entire side themselves. They could be a coach if they took some of the coaching classes, and be certified. Um, and
Well,
and
can
then
I pause for a second?
yeah, please.
Because that sounds like that is a point we should dig into. Because the earlier piece is like you're describing. I mean, everyone's kind of describing helpers, right? Like people that are helping them. But
Yep.
the question is really like, in an ideal world, if you're pulling an assistant coach in, getting an assistant coach to volunteer their time, what are you hoping for from that assistant coach?
Oh, good question. Oh,
Yeah,
great
because I think
question.
there's a difference between the support of the team, just trying to get the field, all the gears brought out, something that a team manager would do, and get cones set up and that kind of stuff, and actually helping with instruction and also the development of coaches, not just helping the team to learn, but to bring coaches along so that the silly thing is we have a couple guys who have been assistant coaches for 10 years. They really should have their own team by now. But I'm trying to get them to spin off and help me by taking one of the other high school teams. But I think we need to. That's one of the other questions is where is the head coach to assistant coach mentorship? How do we formalize that process? How do we bring people through and then let them go? Because if we're going to grow the sport, we can't. I said it was an embarrassment of riches. We should not have actually 8 coaches at
Oh my God,
Hendrickton.
they're breathing while we're talking.
In some ways, it's very helpful because this is a sport where kids, we had some seniors play for the first time, and so they're trying to practice with the kids who are their size. But half the time, what an assistant coach will do is take a kid who still doesn't have a technique down and pull them aside while everybody else is doing stuff and try to help them, and then put them back in and watch them, and then pull them out again and help them, get up quickly. And so there's more help for individual players when you have that many coaches. But I would love to have half the coaches at Hendricken and have my other teams in the state actually have a coach.
Hmm. So let me go back. I think Kate, you asked a great question, and I think I want to contribute to that. And so while Jeff was talking, I was listening, Jeff, but I was also thinking, that's a great question. How do I define what an assistant coach is? And I think that there's 3 things there, and there's probably more, but from how I see things and how I've seen things in the past. I would define an assistant coach, in 3 different ways, three different qualities. One is, much the same way that I like to see players, is they are coachable. So in as much as that they're going to come in and they're going to bring in their own awareness, their own knowledge, their own experience about how to make something work, they're also coachable. Now, I'm not saying that I know everything, but I would like to be able to collaborate with somebody, and the only way to do that is for the person to be coachable. And there's nothing worse than having a player who thinks they're fantastic or whatever, and they're just not coachable. They're just not going to go anywhere. You know what to expect from them, which is great, but they're not going to go anywhere. So they are coachable. Um, the next thing is the, the reason that I'd like to have an assistant coach there is to allow me to step back and instead of being so head down and nose down in a drill, making sure that the drill is working well or the exercise or whatever we're doing, unit, subunit, whatever it is we're trying to do, aside from making sure that that's working well, and also being able to catch the players that are sort of outside the rails of where I want them to be. If there's good assistant coaches, I can step even further back and I can really analyze the individual players because everybody's different. And somebody's, there are many athletes out there that can fill a role quite well doing it their own way, and I want to be able to make sure that I catch that and make sure that I make them mesh well. So that's like a key thing, and that I don't have a lot of time for that, if that makes sense. A lot of times I'm making sure that we're hitting the practice plan correctly, that everybody is falling within the parameters of how it should go, and that we're staying, on track for how the practice should go. And I don't have a lot of time for individual coaching, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of like that's like the key thing. If I have enough help to be able to step, or we as a team have enough help to be able to step back and identify the players that can now be coached one-on-one, that's ideal. That's I mean that's miles ahead.
Sorry, I was like waiting for your third one, but here's what can I just reframe? Can I just say what I heard back to you?
Yes.
So you said you wanted them to be coachable / adaptable, right?
Yep.
Like that they can collaborate with you. I think you mean like they can autonomously run a drill so you can step back and watch it unfold, but also that you can identify individual coaching needs like for independent kids, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
So if they have an awareness of our program, and not just the drills, but the program and how everything's supposed to, what we're trying to achieve from practice to practice to practice, and the whole game, it allows me to not be so head down, and I can start looking more at the individual players.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that was just kind of just starting to answer the question that you asked of, okay, what do we expect from an assistant coach?
Yeah, sorry. And now I'm like, that was a dramatic pause because I was hoping other people were going to drop brilliant insights immediately after you, Daniel.
I have a lame insight if that helps you.
Yeah,
I'm not sure
I'll
I can
take a
pull
layman's insight.
Can't pull brilliant out of anywhere. So I find when I'm working with other coaches with our club, we immediately drop into a peer-based relationship. And so we'll divvy up the workload. In fact, we do that already with these pod concepts we have where we'll rotate the kids through 3 or 4 different things to do during that coaching session. So one person will focus on forward work, one will focus on tackling, one will focus on passing, that sort of stuff, or backs work. And so oftentimes, particularly with Ryan, when he and I have been working together, he's naturally taken the backs play, and we've kind of like partially collaborated, but predominantly led by him, come up with not so much backs drills, but backs plays we want to bring into the game. And I predominantly taken the forward side of things, or the more breakdown parts of the game, etc. And so that's kind of how we work together. But that's not really a head coach assistant coach relationship. It's very much a peer-based relationship. But that's worked well for us. We've been able to coach 2 teams together by doing that. And then when we get to game time, he's head coach of his team, I'm head coach of my team, and we carry on accordingly.
But I think that's that is an interesting tidbit about rugby that I think maybe we don't delve into enough. Like, in other words, because of the existence of 2 different position groups that are responsible for very different things on the field. I mean, everyone passes and tackles and all that stuff, but But like there's nuance and there's safety concerns, and so it's important to have both, two coaches that completely understand and are responsible for, the like passing on that skill set to that group. So in its own way, like rugby really does need at least two coaches at most. I mean, at least I would think.
A minimum, not most.
Yeah. Sorry, that's what I meant. Because and it's not like a head coach, assistant coach. Like you really need a division of that skill set. And that might be unique to
very
rugby.
much more pronounced for you two with your 15 sides. I really do think forward 15s is very, very different and very complex compared to sevens forwards. And so that I think you do need a specialist forwards coach there. I think backs, the amount of density of population on the field for 15 aside means you need to have a more complete and more detailed plan in some ways. It's hard to coach them to play like the French on a good day. Where it's totally instinctive and they're just moving the ball around, popping it between each other, and it's just so beautiful to watch. I think that's, I guess if that wasn't hard to coach, we'd all be doing it.
Yeah.
I think with sevens, I mean, so the way Ryan and I work with the sevens, we take the entire squad of one age group or one team, and we coach them on all on the forwards work and on the backs work, and so they can play very much more interchangeably. Even though when we get to game time, we do start more tightly formalizing their positions. But I think that's the unique difference of sevens to 15s.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I was going to say one of the ways we are probably most peer-like is when we do our selections, and I think that's one of the big functions of assistant coaches, particularly for the 15-a-side. We have the forwards and the backs, and you have an A side and a B side. Is having that player evaluation, being able to spend enough time with a smaller group so that you can evaluate them better instead of the head coach having to decide who's going to play where and who's best suited where and who's developing at which level.
That totally makes sense. That absolutely
And
makes sense.
we have formal selection meetings before the match where we go through everybody and we put together the first 15 and the second 15, and we talk about who the subs will be, and then we find useful things for the kids who aren't going to get much to do.
In terms of getting better, so they can get picked next time, sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah, excellent. How many kids would you normally have to work with to form those two teams, and then obviously you got 15 on the field at any time. How many subs do you have with the teams?
So we've had as many as 100 kids at this, and that can make it really hard. But when we were going down to Connecticut, I mean, each of those teams had 3 sides, so we were having plenty of rugby going around. Part of what we would do is in the sevens, I had 2 or 3 high schools playing sevens, and so the kids who weren't making the 15 side would play the 7 side because it was more developmental with the new teams.
Got it.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, that really
because
is.
there's so much less to learn in sevens.
Yeah. But it's a really a different style, and I really didn't appreciate it until I saw Dave LaFlame's little the way he approaches it, and I realized how much I didn't know. And that's funny. You were talking about the specialties and the forwards and the backs. I still don't know what the backs do, so I wouldn't even begin to think. And I'm not trying to be a smart aleck. It was just not something that I paid attention to because I was never out there doing that. And they had their own plays and their own. Couldn't tell you the difference between a switch and a scissor or whatever. But they do, and they're good at it, and that's what they practice. And so I always go and hang out with the forwards and on the packing down and doing the line out and things like that because I don't want to show my ignorance about the back work.
It's funny. So the traditional concepts are that the back's job is to look pretty, catch the occasional ball the forwards let go of by mistake, and kick it into touch. And the forwards' job, from the back's perspective, is to huddle around each other and keep warm when it's cold, leaving the poor backs to freeze to death.
Oh no, it's true. The sevens versus 15s are totally different games. You when to go into contact, how to go into contact, completely staying out of contact. I mean, the two games are totally different. We could have a complete discussion on that. But to throw in a little bit of awareness, I don't know, to share with Kate and Jeff, another difference in the sevens flag as a reality to assistant coaches. Um, the Ruben and Peter have been assistant coaches because they have their kids, and they were in flag for a long time, obviously. So we have kindergarten through second grade, three through fourth, fifth through sixth, and then they move on to contact. So I've had Peter and I had Ruben for a long time, and they are fantastic. They are really, 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 really wonderful as assistant coaches. But what you see in our club is they're there with their kids. And it's a delight to see the kid come back year after year and advance and do better. And it's sad that I'm going to see that those kids, move on, and I'm not going to coach them anymore because it is fantastic to see them advance. But the other thing that's sad is, um, I know that the parents of those kids are going to continue to assistant coach, but they're going to move up with that kid. And I've made it very clear to Ruben and to Peter. And if you guys are listening, guys, you guys are actually fantastic. And we've had this discussion before. You're there because you're in delight of being there with your kid. I fully expect them to move on and not assistant coach with me anymore, move on because they're kind of following their kid through the process. They're following the kid through the different years. And actually, in a way, I'm kind of jealous because they're getting to see the different stages, and they're in a way, I think that they're becoming better coaches than I am because they're getting a chance to see how one level coaches, how the next level coaches, how the next level coaches, while I'm very focused on how it is that I am coaching. So I don't have the time to move and be able to watch somebody's complete practices once or twice or three times ever. Like Kate, I would love to go see how you run your practices. Jeff, I would love to see how your practices would run. In fact, I would be ecstatic to be able to see Alan's practices, how they run. And his is just across the field and I can't see it. So I'm really, it's a bittersweet that Peter and that assistant coaches are gonna, at least for a team, a club like us that has many different groups, many different teams, sides. It's awesome to see the kids grow, and it's awesome to see the assistant coaches grow also. And my only hope is that, out of all the kids and all the parents, assistant coaches that we have go through the entire program, that at some point some of them will go and start their own clubs or will come back and be head coaches for us, and they'll have the full awareness of how the different sides do their practices. So not only are they learning sort of like backs versus forwards, but they're kind of learning how many different sides do their practices the entire way. Does that make sense?
It does,
Yeah.
but I suspect you're going to age out with your sons and come on up into the contact worlds, because as I age out of high school and move back into, heaven forbid, kindergarten and second grade,
So
it just goes full circle.
so is that the progression? We go up to the top and then go back to the bottom. When you get to the top, you go back to the bottom, kind of like a helter skelter.
I don't know how many times you get to do that. So there's a certain thing called age that gets in the way.
Right, right,
But
right.
yeah, I mean, I'm probably the first coach to age out at the top of the pile. But yeah, my expectation is that Ryan will kick me out and take over because his son is younger than mine. Then Pete, and you didn't mention the fact that Pete, the assistant coach, was born playing rugby in the womb on the grounds that he's from New Zealand,
Yep.
and is not aware there is another sport on the planet. But yeah, he'll follow his son through, and at some point he's probably going to be coaching, high school, well, the high school varsity age sevens team, and then depending on what he wants to do, he may pop back in at the low level. So yeah, I think for us as a club, to your point, Daniel, we track our kids as best we can, and we'll cycle through, and everyone gets to play at everything.
As a side note, don't any of you guys have daughters? Like, where are the girls in this? Just kidding.
No is the answer to your question. I have a daughter, and she's actually not the sort of person who'd end up wanting to play rugby.
Ugh.
She's a great person to watch rugby with because she snuggles, but she doesn't really interrupt very much, which is good. And she's happy when I jump out of my seat to yell at the referee that she actually lets go, and that all works out nicely.
All right, fair.
Hey,
But yes,
while
it's a fair
we're
question.
talking about this general topic, I did want to bring up kind of a negative thing about it, because if we're gonna
Yeah.
bring any topic around, we need to see positives as well as negatives.
Absolutely.
And I don't want to, of course, name any names or anything, but I have seen, bringing a parent on and giving them some things to do. I have seen that kind of run amok when the parent hasn't want to necessarily follow the direction of the head coach, becomes partly a rugby groupie or kind of a fan who gets to watch from the sidelines, and doesn't necessarily participate in the coaching, hasn't bothered to progress, but still wants to be part of that group, and start speaking up when it comes to election time and those types of things. And so we have, and I think that's also part of the informality we've had about bringing on assistant coaches, that if anybody can do it, anybody can do it. And suddenly you have people who don't necessarily want to do the work, but they want to wear the jacket and stand on the sidelines and yell at the ref.
Oh yeah.
Well, one hopes no one yells at the ref, to be honest, but I know what you're saying, Jeff. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've actually had some unfortunate discussions with people to say, you either have to be in this or not. And, their kids long gone from the school, and they're still on the sideline, pretending like they're part of the show, and not contributing, and frankly, an impediment.
Yeah, that's a shame.
I guess that's one thing to look out for. Now, the one thing that I truly fear is giving somebody, the keys to the Ferrari, and then them jumping in and yelling at the kids, or yelling at parents, or screaming from the sidelines, and not being the I want to wear the jacket but not do any of the heavy lifting. But the other side of the coin being, I want the authority to then start, misusing that authority. That I fear. I'll be really honest. That panics me, which is why I think I am. Not doing as good a job as I could about ferreting out more parents that could be, brought in as assistant coaches. I'll bring them in to help in drills and stuff, but
I think, Daniel, you've got to deal with the fact that you see the parents as cones with some level of intellectual capacity beyond being just a dead cone. Based on the way you described it, I was going to comment earlier, that's probably why the kids love you so much, is that they also see their parents as cones, and now they've met an adult who also sees them in exactly the same way. So you're on the same page. It's a phenomenal starting point. But in terms of getting those cones to see you as a peer they want to work with, I think you got to work a little bit on your technique there, dude. Just say it. Just say it. Nothing,
I agree with you. I think you're definitely right about that, and I think part of the thing that scares me is, bringing in that parent that's then going to be a loose cannon, and I'm worried about that. Jeff, I'm not sure if you've had to had to deal with that, or if anybody's had to deal with that. Because it's one thing to be a coach in the senior side, and have sort of a professional discussion with somebody and say, you're stepping over the boundaries here. You're making decisions, or you're taking on a role that you haven't earned, that you haven't grown into just yet, or that is being contrary to what we're trying to achieve. It's one thing to do that, to have that discussion with an adult. It's another thing to have that discussion with a parent around sort of like youth rugby. I just
So Daniel, do you recall a couple of years ago we had a kind of a coaches meeting, and we were discussing where the team was going to go, or where the club was going to go. And there were the three of us who were kind of there from the start, and then there was 3 or 4 who were kind of coming in new coaches, or new as in hadn't been with us for 4 or 5 years at that point. And so we were discussing the difference between the club as a high performance club versus the club as an inclusive club. And not the two preclude each other, but the 3 of us who kind of were there from the beginning, we were very, very clear. Every kid's going to play.
Yep.
winning is a secondary benefit of all of us playing well together as a team. We're more focused on getting kids playing rugby, having fun, enjoying ourselves, and the kids, that's the kids enjoying themselves, should I say. And so for me, everything you're saying is absolutely something that we also dealt with and we're concerned about. And I think the answer is a single word: it's culture. You've got to breed that culture in your club. And I can't speak for schools, but for as a club person, we want a culture where it's about fun, it's about learning, it's about growing, it's about trying really hard, it's about being a team and being there for your teammates and being respectful. And it's about recognizing that when you come off the pitch because another kid substituted in for you, it's because that's what's just happened and nothing else is to be read into it. It's not about having a bad game or a bad day or being a poor player. It's that everyone's going to play, and together we're going to do the best we possibly can as a team. And when we do win things, we've all won it. And when we've lost something, we've all lost it. It's not about individuals in our club, at least. And that's, to be honest, we try very hard for that culture. And, to your point, in terms of you bringing the parents in, that will be the message we give them. If they're here to win, there are other clubs who are absolutely going to pick them up and want to work with them, etc. If they're there to help kids have fun playing rugby and grow more rugby players, we're the club for you.
Yeah, go ahead, Kate.
I was just going to say, I was going to bring this. Well, Daniel, you talk first, and then I'll talk.
I was just going to tie into the thing that Jeff was talking about earlier, and Kate, you were talking about that earlier, but Jeff, if you have 100 kids, we don't have the problem of having to do selections in our club. And another huge difference between flag and youth versus full contact 15s at our level, as Alan said, everybody's playing. There is no limit to the roster in the games in the jamborees, so you're just getting subbed. Every try, I'm subbing 3 kids out, 2 kids out, 4 kids out, so that everybody has a chance to play, whether we're 10 points behind, 10 points ahead, or 3 points. And there's 30 seconds left in the game. Everybody's playing, everybody's getting subbed, and the selections of who starts is really more around sort of an honor guard type of situation. It's not really first 15, first 7 type of thing. So, yeah, another thing that I don't have to deal with just yet. Or it's not in our culture, I should say.
With the middle school team 2 years ago,
Yeah.
we had like 22 kids playing middle school. And you got a formal sevens team. You're only allowed to take 12 kids to a tournament. And so we formed 2 teams. And more importantly, we formed 2 equal teams, not an A team and a B team. And at the end of the season, there were 2 other clubs who had a similar, 20 plus kids in their squads. And so at the start, there were 6 teams. At the end of the season, we were the only club that had 2 teams at the Bay State games, because every kid had played in every single game, and every kid had been given a fair shot at doing the best they possibly could. And only at Bay State did Ryan actually select an A side and a B side, and he did an incredible job to keep 22 kids really hungry to play rugby. And I just think it's testament to, for our club, it's testament to what we want to achieve. The club should be free to do whatever they feel is appropriate, but that for us was really important. And I've obviously harped on about this too long now.
Well, but I think that's one of the roles that I think, and I guess maybe to clarify how we do it at Hendricken, is that we do have the A side and the B side, or the red side, or whatever they do in Connecticut. And so, during the week, we all practice together. And leading up to maybe the last half of the last practice before the match on the weekend, we break up into A side and B side. There's a clear B side head coach. He's one of the assistant coaches for the A side, and a B side assistant coach who's also one of the assistants. So, we split up the staff when it comes to A side and B side, and making sure that we have a head coach. There is one head coach for the B side, and he has his assistants. And so, and when we go, and we've showed up before with 3 sides, we go ahead and we establish another head coach, so that there is somebody who is the one person who's, the field general for that particular time. And I think that's a value. That's, one of the big values of having enough assistant coaches to do that, is that you can have people focusing on the forwards and backs separately, A side and B side separately, and have this hierarchy. The unfortunate thing is we don't have we don't promote out of that, and people stay in the roles that they've been doing years and years and years. I'd love to see new kids come in who have graduated, be assistant coaches, and go off and be a head coach somewhere else, because we got some talented coaches.
I was thinking about what Daniel was saying about like the fear of having someone kind of a little bit off culture, to use Alan's language, being brought in or being asked to participate, and then like you've asked them and perhaps they aren't working out in the way that you had anticipated, and it's all volunteer anyway, and so it's like then it becomes and their kids there, that whole thing. And I don't have parents participating as assistant coaches, but I think like in general that would make me very nervous unless that parent was a rugby person who like understood cultural norms of rugby, I guess. And when I think about what I really want from an assistant coach, it kind of goes back to what I think kind of everyone's talking about: having a program, having a concept, having an idea, having a progression, having a culture that you are perpetuating in your system. And so a really big thing for me about bringing in assistant coaches is this a person who I can talk to about that program? Is there a person who, is willing to kind of like take what they know about the game and then adapt it with the kids at hand? Because at the end of the day, what everyone's kind of saying is that this is about the kids. And so, yeah, we want kids to play, or we want great rugby, but we want everyone to be playing their best rugby. How do we, I think that conversation about assistant coaches when working with kids has to be very much like, are we all on the same page? Are we all working together towards the same goal?
And that takes more bandwidth from the coach also. If you're the head coach, the onus is on you. The responsibility is all on you. And bringing in assistant coaches means, yeah, you have the opportunity to have a better program. But I think the way it's structured right now, or at least the feeling from me, is that if you're bringing in assistant coaches, you're on the hook to, one, vet them, make sure that they are a good fit for the club. And two, you're on the hook to develop them also, partly because you need to have a good partner relationship to do a good job at practice. And two, you kind of owe it to that person to do your best to share with them the things that have made you successful. So, maybe not necessarily my job to coach them to be better coaches, because I'm just one person. I do what I do the way that I've done it because this is the way that I've been shaped. My way, I'm not saying is the best way, but putting that aside, I feel that it's on my shoulders to ensure that person advances as a coach, so that they get more out of it, and it's more rewarding, and perhaps they they grow in that aspect also. I think if there was more, maybe I just haven't thought about bringing them to USA Rugby in those coaching clinics, to take some of that bandwidth on it, and not necessarily feel like it's on my shoulders.
Yeah, but even those clinics are not, I mean, like, they're wonderful. They essentially ensure that people are like kind of on a safety page, I think, like, and maybe have an idea of how to structure practice. But I feel like I hear what you're saying. I also feel like to have good assistant coaches, you have to be a much better manager of coaches as a head coach. Like, it is on you, is really what I'm saying.
I get the impression it's much harder for you guys at high school than it is in some ways for us at club.
It's much more formal, I think.
That may be a better choice of words. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think like a part of this might be that there are rules around like who can coach at the high school level in some ways. But even when I started a high school team and we were a club, you know, like there's just a level of expectation, I think, about like even from the parents. Like parents don't, I think, at the high school level, at least like in a single school scenario, want to see other parents potentially just jumping in and helping, you know, like I think there is, if you're going to ask, from my perspective, if I'm going to ask parents to trust their kid with me, I'm working to get a really qualified staff around me to say, hey, there's a lot of people that are looking out for the safety and development of your child. And we're working to be the best that we can be at it, you know?
And without
I
being
think
too
that's-
we have
vulgar,
to-
though, I think didn't Daniel touch on that earlier on with the concept of there is some income associated with it for you guys, you know, if that's not too crass.
Oh no, there is now. But at the beginning, like at the very beginning, there was none.
Okay, you were just the same as us, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like realistically, when I started the club in 2015, I actually had 3 assistant coaches. It was my first time head coaching. I had no idea how to manage assistant coaches. And none of us got paid, and we were all figuring it out all the time. And it was a mishmash, but I think everyone kind of like learned and grew. And then you're right. And over time, as it got much more formal, and as our team got taken into the MIAA, there was money and compensation both for me and for an assistant coach. And then we also have like a fundraising organization that allows a little bit of compensation for assistant coaches as well. But it's not, let's just say nobody's getting rich.
You're not retiring. You had to
Right.
find
No.
other ways to fuel your Ferrari.
Yes.
Yeah.
Conscious of the conversation
Yeah.
2 weeks ago.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
Right. And you know, and aside from that, you know, it's just more. God. Okay, I'm going to be really honest here. It's just more work. You know.
Yeah.
It seems so much easier to just step out there and do it yourself. And at 50, at sevens, it's very doable. At 15s, you know, I've been a head coach of a 15 side without assistant coaches, and that's really tough. It is very tough. It's just a lot easier in sevens. And when you're bringing in an assistant coach, you know, having to get together, having to have the extra meetings, having to have, you know, and they're fun. I'm not going to say they're not fun. Some of them are work. It is hard work. But it is fun getting together to ensure that you're all going in the right direction. We're all pushing and pulling in the same direction. And then also, you know, the added aspect of perhaps being able to do some coaching of the assistant coach to make them a better coach. But that's just one. It's just more work. And two, the stress factor. Like, am I doing this right? You know, am I messing everything up? Am I, you know, sitting up here and I'm the head coach and I'm throwing all these edicts out and you know this is the best way of doing it. You know, and you know finding out a couple years later that no, you've been doing everything wrong. That's not the way a leader really is supposed to act, and that's not the best coaching techniques. It's just stressful to bring in assistant coaches.
I love that I completely agree with you. And as you were describing it, because I feel the same way that like sometimes what's happening in my brain is so clear and to describe it to other people is so much harder. But what I was laughing at when you were saying it is this idea that like we're comfortable being imperfect in front of our own players and adapting and like acknowledging that we're not quite right. Like we're able to be like, and then like pivot and do it a different way. But to do that with peers, with other adults that are there helping you coach is so much harder. It makes that head coach position a little bit more vulnerable in some ways. So yeah, I agree.
You should read business management books. Being vulnerable is a key part of building the team ethos of coming together. I'm not entirely being facetious here. You know, you have to give a little bit to get a little bit, and being willing to be flawed is a door opening to allow everybody else to be flawed. Not to accept flaws and make them okay, but to say yes, I'm not perfect, therefore I will make mistakes, but I hold you as my colleagues in high enough esteem that I'm willing to have you help me through those mistakes. Which kind of, to me, goes back to that peer relationship that I've been lucky enough to have in the last 3-4 years I've been coaching with with Ryan particularly.
Yeah,
I've
and
not
it
felt
sounds like
any
that's
of the
something.
stress you guys describe. I think it's probably the honest way of putting it. I've appreciated having the help.
No, but then that also points to the fact that you've got a partner that you respect and communicate really well with.
Yes, yes, definitely, yeah.
Because I've had an assistant coach over 5 years that by 5th year, we don't even need words. We can be like, oh, that thing, because we're gonna do the space with the kicking, and she's like, yep, got it. And that's just time and respect and communication. It definitely didn't start that way,
Yeah, I mean, never does
yeah.
with anybody. You don't arrive speaking the that sort of secret street patois until you get to know each other and hang out on that same street corner for a couple of years. But yeah, no, I'm with you.
Well, but even at the high school level, we still have the legitimacy issue, and we're competing with other sports. So we have to put as many artifices as we can in to make it look like we have our act together. So having a coaching staff and having more than just the head coach out there, I think is huge for parents. They, particularly with a sport like rugby, they certainly don't want to think it's fly by night. And so that's again one of it is my single biggest challenge trying to start the league in Rhode Island is having coaches and assistant coaches to staff up the teams that I've been able to get.
So let me throw this last question, or let me throw this next question out. How many of you are comfortable enough with the assistant? Oh, this is very personal. So maybe facsimile. So in another universe, how would your doppelganger how comfortable will your doppelganger feel in saying, hey, assistant coach person, you're really awesome. I really like the way you've been developing. Well, next season, why don't you be head coach next season, and I'll be assistant coach for you? How many of us are willing to make that go through that exercise for a year? I know that I have complete respect for Ruben and Peter. Oh God, naming them makes this exercise even harder. So I probably shouldn't have said their
Well,
name.
Ruben and Peter's doppelgangers, not those
Right,
two,
exactly.
obviously.
Right. So
It's some people like them.
right, exactly. So doppelganger Peter and Ruben. I just have a lot of fun being, the one who is responsible for coming up with a game plan, writing it out, trying to get it out, trying to describe everything. So I have a lot of fun being the person that kind of organizes and gets in the face of everybody to move in the right direction. But if they came to me and said, hey, we want to do this, um, I'd have to have a stiff drink and steel myself and say, yes, let's go ahead and do it. But I think I would cry a little bit on the inside.
Well, let me turn it around and ask you another way. So,
Yeah.
so if I were to say to you, Daniel, can you come and assistant coach me with my team? Would you be reaching for the whiskey as well, or tequila, or vodka, or whatever it is?
Oh no, I would do it in a second.
But somehow you think there's some huge thing you could learn from me that potentially you couldn't learn from Ruben or Peter. And it's a somewhat rhetorical question because I actually have the opinion the other way around, that I would happily come and coach for you and learn from you.
And so the hidden question, and this is what I was thinking about, the latent question in that original question is a question of resiliency, of am I doing enough so that if I were to step away for a week, a month, a year, um, am I doing a good enough job at my role to ensure that there's going to be that that bench strength to push forward, and there's not going to be any lapse in the pro in what we do. So it's an easier question to say, hey, let's swap for a year for funsies, as opposed to, are we ready? Is there somebody there? Have I helped enough my assistant coach so that if for some reason I did need to drop for a month or a year, um, did I do a good enough job?
I
And
don't know
your
that
question
this.
is, Yeah, I was gonna say, what's your question and who you asking?
So I guess it's just a question out there for everybody. Like we have assistant coaches that are there to help us, but are we helping them enough to be the one that steps up if for some reason we need to step away, right? Because I mean, you know, you would think that the assistant coach would be the best natural replacement as
Stand-in.
opposed to having to get sorry Kate, what'd you say?
Nothing. Continue. Sorry.
Or the stand-in. Yeah, the stand-in, exactly. It'd be so much easier for that person to just walk right into the role since they've been there the entire time, as opposed to having to suddenly go out there and try to find somebody else. And you know, maybe my question is not a very good question, not very interesting, but
No,
yeah,
I think I don't think it's possible at my level, like as in there's a lot of logistics, but if you
okay,
take the logistics out of it, there's like my backs coach who I've worked with for 5 years. I would feel 100% confident saying, yeah, please take this team. And I think that's also about just like knowing. I mean, to some extent, I think like we really did coach in a lot of ways, not like on the day to day on the field, we coached as like a dual set. But this kind of links nicely with what Jeff was saying too, which is like, are we giving people the opportunity to like leave? Are we pushing assistant coaches to take on enough responsibility and to learn how to do the hard jobs like the planning and the progressions and all that stuff so that they then leave and coach somewhere else? I think that's significantly a goal of mine. Like, for example, with that said coach who has unfortunately moved away, so I can talk about her. She just moved, but like the year before we sat down and had a long conversation where I was like, you know, honestly, you should be coaching your own program. That would be a really hard hit for our program, but it would be amazing for all these girls that you would get to coach. It would be another solid squad. And I think she went from never having coached to 5 years of coaching as a backs coach at our high school. And I felt confident being a head coach because I spent 5 years assistant coaching at BU, and I got more and more responsibility every year. And I think that is a key piece to having long, fruitful assistant coaching relationships is giving more responsibility.
yeah, true. That makes sense. I agree with that 100%. All right. Anybody else want to throw another controversy grenade in there? Nope.
Sorry, I feel like I just destroyed conversation there.
Oh
No,
no,
not at all. Yeah, I was
not at
saying,
all.
I mean, from my perspective, I don't think I've ever held myself in a high enough regard to consider myself in any way remotely irreplaceable. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a different thing coaching, you know, sevens and flag through into, you know, literally being with predominantly the same kids for many, many years through their journey through rugby. It's not the same, I think, as coaching 15s, and I suspect the pressure on me from the parents is significantly lower than probably the pressure that, you know, high school coaches who coach at high schools face. So maybe that's the big difference. But one thing I do know is when I ask, you know, so when Ryan and I are working together, we do make sure we try and understand what the other one's looking to get for that team, get out of their team. We're very conscious we have to coach the team, not the game plan. Yeah,
Right.
so the
Yep.
physical makeup of his team is very different to the physical makeup of my team, and so we have to do different things for the two teams to get them to where we want them to be. And so in that respect, there's some, you know, some thought going in there, and that's the only part of, yeah, I don't know that I'd be happy being replaced for a period of time and then coming back. I have a plan in my head of where I want the kids to go. But beyond that, you know, I suspect virtually any of the coaches in our club could replace me without a blink of an eye or anything being lost at all.
What a healthy ego to have right there.
Well, it's maybe the only moment in my life that my ego reaches healthy state and gets small enough to be seen that way, because it doesn't affect me in any other aspect. That's why rugby's so good for me.
That's awesome. Excellent. Well, I mean, we hit all like the big, topics that I wanted to sort of talk about and get off my chest. Anything else anybody else want to throw out there as something we can mull over?
Clearly, we need more assistant coaches whose
Yeah.
journey to becoming head coaches needs to be encouraged and grown. It's more coaches. We just need more coaches.
And
But
maybe
make sure
there's
you've finished your playing career first.
and this is something that Sarah Greeley and I have talked about over and over again. She's the head coach of Lincoln Sudbury, is this desire to kind of build a mentorship program, like, and we just don't know exactly, like, there's, by the time it comes around to it, we haven't done enough to actually roll it out. But like, realistically, we want people to come in for a season, like come in once a season, just like see how this runs, and get information. Like, like we're thinking specifically female coaches, but I'd let any coach in there and say, like, learn how we're running practices, and then go, please coach somewhere else. That might be something to put on the wish list.
That would be
That
awesome thing.
that would be
Really,
so
really. Yeah.
awesome. Because I think I mentioned in resources, the discussion that we just had 2 weeks ago. Some of the most uh, uh, important times that I've had in rugby, as far as learning in rugby, have been the times that I've gone and seen how other coaches run their programs, even if it was for just a day. And I think the example that I gave is, you get involved with selections camps, or in any of those camps or clinics that a team puts together, because they always need bodies, just to help, you be a semi-autonomous cone. But you get to be there, and you get to observe. I think it's just on me. I haven't done enough to just walk across the field and watch Alan's in Ryan's practices, or walk across the field in the other direction and watch Steve's practices, because as much as we've sort of grown as a club and helped each other and kind of know how we're doing, we've been at it for a while now, and I can see how we've all refined our programs, and what is happening on those fields day to day, minute to minute. I know it's just leaps and bounds what I saw and how I participated in it, 5 years ago. But I just haven't done that, and I would love to be able to do that. As I said earlier, I'm a little jealous of the assistant coaches that are moving with their kids, following their kids, which I think they absolutely should do, and should not feel sorry or bad, or any hard feelings in it whatsoever. They should absolutely. The expectation is, yes, go ahead. You're here for your kids, so go with it. But I'm
I
also
feel like you're speaking specifically to Ruben and Peter right
Oh
now.
well, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
no,
no.
it is, isn't it? Can you sense the edge of
Well, it's because I've had that exact
all inside
right.
Daniel's body. Daniel, dude, I'll call Steve tonight. I'll get him out of his bed, and I'll talk to him and tell him that you need to move on. You
No,
need
no,
to
no. I
study
definitely
with
don't want to.
somebody
Well,
else.
I've got Nicholas coming through, so I'm definitely going to be in the group that I'm in for the next 4 years, at least. But Kate, bringing it back to where you were, I I would love, it's just, life gets in the way. I would love to be able to watch anybody else's practice, even if it is just for one day, and sit there and just ask a couple questions and just be a helper. And in the same way, like, my door is wide open. If anybody, is trying to start a program or has an established program and they want to come see how somebody else is doing it, my door is absolutely always open. I'd love to have a little bit of, notice, so that I can, shave
Make
and
it your
look a
best
little nicer for that particular day. But yeah, I'm absolutely, I'm with you. That would be such a useful thing. I love that thinking. That is so cool.
Yeah.
Actually, the combined winter training we've been historically doing with
Yep.
the Wolfhounds has given us a great opportunity to cross-pollinate with other clubs.
Yep.
and see what other people do and pick some stuff up and borrow some good ideas and things like that.
And now if we could just pull like college kids into that, right? Like get some college rugby players into the winter training programs and be like, here, learn how to coach people. Like it's just I don't know how to do it yet, but we need something to funnel people that are playing rugby at like college levels but aren't going to continue playing. How do we keep them involved? I don't know the answer
They
yet.
drop playing rugby as soon as they leave college. Yeah.
That's a great
Well,
point.
there's a significant portion that does,
Yep.
So,
Disappear.
Yeah. You probably want to do a quick bit of research on why do they drop rugby? Do they drop rugby because they're tired of all the singing and all the fun they have, or they drop rugby because they just don't have enough time in their day? Former means absolutely prime material for coaching high school kids. The latter means they're probably not.
Yeah, that's fair.
Exactly.
All right. This was lovely, guys.
Yeah, this is pretty awesome. All right, anybody else? Anything else? Or I think we've pretty much explored this as far as we can go in one night. We're good?
Yes.
I think we're good.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah, Alan, I think what you said earlier was just so on key. We need more coaches. We need more assistant coaches. I think with Kate, what you said earlier of opening your door, and that's what I'm doing. I'm definitely welcoming anybody, any coach out there, or anybody that wants to see, how what I do, more than welcome to come. And if anybody's interested in being an assistant coach, just know that you're going to be under the microscope, but absolutely step up and say that you're interested in helping out, because it is a lot of fun and super rewarding. The only problem you might run into is you're stuck doing it for the next 10, 15 years, and it'll be absolutely awesome. Okay, I
And
think
you'll be known as a semi-autonomous cone.
semi-autonomous cone, or
But
just
don't feel
above.
at all
No,
put down.
Just above a smart cone.
right.
That's
And
right.
assistant coach is just above a semi-autonomous cone.
You'd be like a calculator from the 1980s.
Yes, yes, exactly. With a plan a program that you can execute. All right, I think we're done with this one, folks. You guys, thank you so much for participating in these discussions. This is only possible because you guys are coming out here and having fun. And for those of you listening, I hope you learned something, and join us for more episodes. Whenever we put out the next one.